the Convention Centre, Spencer Dock Dublin, designing, divining European purpose, European possibilities. None of these things are automatic, are they? I mean, it's the values we infuse it with. It's what we bring to it. It's what we make it. So, what will we make it? Europe. Well, nearly 200 years ago, since Victor Hugo foresaw a United States of Europe in which, I quote, "wild tumult is transformed into order and animosity into love." Sounds a bit hippie, but I actually like the word love being used because I love Europe. For all our achievements, I love Europe. For all we miss, I love Europe. Nearly 60 years, though, for all our achievements, nearly 60 years after the Treaty of Rome, we have to admit that Europe is still an economic entity that needs to become a social entity. Europe is still a thought that needs still to become a feeling. Europe is a thought that needs to become a feeling. Now this is the point when right-minded or centre-right-minded politicians start squirming in their seats. Oh my God, the rock star is going to start talking about his feelings. He's probably going to ask us to hug each other or something awful. One big European group hug, started by the Irish, resisted by the British, and paid for by the Germans. But look. I noticed this translation, it just takes a while. But look, you lot that write the treaties and sign them, you know better than anyone that treaties are not enough. These are the things that organize us, but they are not the things that define us. Our relationships are what define us. And relationships are the stuff of emotion, are they not? And I want just for a second to just allow myself to get emotional about the European project, because just the fact that it still exists is an incredible thing to me, because 12 months ago that didn't look so certain, did it? The euro and all. I'd pull out a euro, but that would be a really bad photograph for me. But I am very grateful that Europe exists, and I want to thank you all for holding on to it so tightly. Thank you all in this building. Europe is a thought that needs to become a feeling. Because when Americans talk about their United States, they get all misty-eyed and emotional. I mean, even Irish people get misty-eyed and emotional talking about the United States. Why? Do we get emotional and misty-eyed when we think about Europe? And if not, why not? There are 54 countries on the continent of Africa, and the people who live in them call themselves Africans. How many of us call ourselves Europeans? You know, I think more of us would if we were united not just by bonds of interest, but by bonds of affection. If we cared more about each other, understood each other's pain, would we do something more to help each other? For example, when you see young people, nearly a quarter of them out of work, fighting for their economic future, what happens? Yes, you guys discuss what happens. You've got Prime Minister Rajoy just this week urging the EU to make structural reforms that will create liquidity in the Spanish economy. Maybe you will. But beyond that, where's the family's response? Where is our Europe-wide campaign to spotlight Spain, to encourage others to take their holidays there, to buy Spanish goods, listen to Spanish music? Have you two make a flamenco album? Maybe not. Maybe not. You know what I'm talking about? Neighbourliness. I can tell you what we do in Ireland. There's a word, mehel. Mehel. Is that the correct pronunciation? Mehel. It means the group, the village, help one another out, and they help most when the work is hardest. In my experience, most Europeans are like that. We discover who we are in service to our neighbours. Chancellor Merkel, you said in 2007, we do not really need to give a soul to Europe, it already has one. Well, Chancellor, I agree, and maybe you agree that we sometimes find it tough to show that soul. I'd argue that the soul of Europe is most visible when we're facing outward. When we're facing inward, we're Irish, we're German, you're French, you're them, we're us. Of course we're not always going to agree, that's democracy. But facing outward, that's when we become one. That's when we're Europe. Manly Europe, in a gender-neutral kind of way. Manly Europe in leather, pointy leather, Spanish leather, pointy Italian shoes, English tailored suit, French shirt, driving a German car with an Irish sense of the rules of the road. We see traffic lights as advice. But seriously, when we unite around something bigger than ourselves, like for example, the Eurovision Song Contest? No. The Champions League? No. No. When we behave like champions in Brussels, like last year, when the Parliament, President Barroso, many of you here, I'd like to especially mention our own Minister Richard Bruton, because you did something remarkable. You passed an anti-corruption law requiring oil and gas companies to make public what they pay for mining rights, so that in poorer countries, more of the wealth under the ground ends up in the hands of those that live above it. Champions, thank you. And now, right now, you're working on an anti-money laundering law, one that demands shell companies and trusts to tell us who actually owns them. So corrupt monies cannot be hidden away. There's a transparency revolution happening, and Europe is at the forefront of it. This is daylight. Without it, you cannot fight the corruption that keeps the poor poor, and you cannot fight the secrecy that keeps the corrupt rich. If anyone wants to see how this plays, when you've got no transparency, you might ask our Ukrainian friends. We've all heard about Yanukovych. He's not Irish, by the way. We've all heard about Yanukovych and his vast, opulent mansion, which might make even a rock star blush a bit excessive. You may have read Global Witness and a Ukrainian NGO are reporting that this palace was part owned by an anonymous UK shell company. Perfectly legal, perfectly corrupt. When Europe stops and exposes corruption, Europe reveals its soul. We have soul.